What's up guys, Frank Dingleberry here. So recently Call of Duty released its open beta on PC for World War II, and they actually suggested 12 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty insane as a recommendation, and so it got me thinking, what does 16 gigabytes of RAM get you nowadays in comparison to 8 gigabytes? Because 8 gigabytes has basically been the golden standard for gaming PCs nowadays, and so everybody always recommends, make sure you have 8 gigabytes, you don't need any more. Just as long as you have 8, you're good. That is basically the understanding amongst the PC community. But personally, I've had 16 gigabytes for a while, probably 2 years now I've been having 16 gigabytes in my system, and I've definitely noticed just a general smoothness and performance increase that you just don't get when you have 8 gigabytes. And I'm not quite sure why that happens, but even if a game doesn't like anything more than 4 or 5 gigabytes, it still seems to impact the smoothness and the fluidity of the gameplay. So 16 gigabytes for me is something that I've always been recommending to people who are asking about building gaming PCs. And so with all this in mind, the only thing I can think of doing is to make a video and compare by taking benchmarks. And so currently I have a 2x8 gigabyte kit of Corsair Vengeance 2400 megahertz. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of the sticks and test using just that one stick in single channel. And I know some people are probably going to be like, oh, there's benefits to having 2 sticks or 1 stick. But honestly, when people are buying gaming PCs, especially people on a budget, they generally go for the motherboards that are cheaper and may only have 2 slots for RAM. And when they do this, they decide, I'm just going to get one 8 gigabyte stick now. That way I can get another 8 gigabyte stick whenever I need to and upgrade basically at any time. And so regardless of what is more beneficial between single channel and dual channel, I believe that having one 8 gigabyte stick is more relevant to the massive majority of people out there who have gaming PCs. And if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you have an 8 gigabyte stick and you're looking to upgrade and you want to know if it's even worth it. So yeah, this is the method of testing that I chose to do, and I think it's a good idea. So anyways, if you want to know my specs, check the description down below, but basically it is an AMD R5-1600 clocked at 3.8 gigahertz with Kingston Hyper 212 Evo, and my GPU is an MSI Gaming X 8GB RX 480, and then of course the either 16 or 8 gigabytes of DDR4. And so we are going to be testing 8 games today and 2 synthetics tests, which are going to be pass mark, and which will give the scores for everything, which is, it'll give you the CPU score, the GPU score, and surprisingly the RAM does affect quite a bit, so I'm just going to give you all the scores there. And then same with Firestrike afterwards, so it's going to be 10 tests in total. And as of now, starting in this video, I'm going to be replacing the minimum frame rate with a 0.1% lows and the 1% lows. And if you don't know what that is, basically everybody's doing it now. And they do this basically because the minimum only represents an extreme dip that may only happen once while gaming, whereas the 0.1% and 1% lows, basically they gather up all of your lowest frame rates and make an average of it, so it better represents the kind of gameplay that you'll be experiencing. But yeah, I guess that's everything I need to say beforehand, so stick around after the benchmarks and we'll discuss a bit of the results that we had found. And if you're new to the channel, then please subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and let me know if you have anything specifically you'd like to see me do, and leave a like because it makes me happy. So yeah, without further ado, let's roll the benchmarks. So yeah, those are the results, and there's some quite interesting stuff in there, specifically the Black Ops 3. I don't know what was happening there, but it was a repeatable test, and basically every time it turned out that the one stick of RAM, I was actually getting better frame rates than when I had the 16 gigabytes. But aside from this one specific anomaly, the rest of the games, they did seem to benefit from having more RAM. And it may not be something that you see in raw FPS numbers, but you can definitely feel it in the fluidity. And like Ghost Recon Wildlands, the first 30 seconds that I ran the game, it dropped down to about 5 or 6 FPS, and I don't know what it was doing or why this was happening, but it did not happen when I had 16 gigabytes, no matter how many times I tested it. So when I started the game, yeah, I did just get this horrible lag, and then when I did jump into the game, it felt quite jittery. It felt like I was only getting 30 to 40 FPS, even though I guess the average was 50. And like Rise of the Tomb Raider, I unfortunately didn't use the 0.1% lows just because I used the numbers that the benchmark spat at me, and I didn't want to have fraps catch things in between the loading screens because it does load a few different benchmark scenes. And yeah, for some reason the average was quite a bit higher with the one stick of RAM. The frames felt very sticky and the minimum was awful. It really felt like that there was a good, 40 milliseconds between each frame, and it just was not enjoyable at all. And Battlegrounds, it's a pretty bad representation of an optimized game, but it is insanely popular, and I know a lot of people out there are looking to play this game. So if you are planning on playing Battlegrounds and you only have 8 gigabytes of RAM, or you're building a PC for the purpose of playing Battlegrounds, I strongly recommend 16 gigabytes because it felt extremely jittery with only 8. And of course there's Fallout 4, which is just a jittery mess when you're playing with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but like Battlegrounds, it's also an incredibly unoptimized game, but then again, it has been out for 2 years, so I don't see it getting any better. So if this is the best that it's going to give, and you want to play this game, then yes, 16 gigabytes is the way to go. And as for the others, which is Dying Light, Elder Scrolls Online, and Metro Last Light, those games, they didn't feel too bad, but the averages were affected, and you really do get a boost just by throwing in another stick of RAM, so... And that's basically the conclusion to this video, which is games are just going to be getting more and more demanding as time goes on. It's just going to be an uphill battle from here, and 8 gigabytes might be passable today, but next year it might not be, so you should jump on RAM while the prices are low, because from what I hear, RAM is just going to be getting more and more expensive as time goes on, just due to like the amount of RAM they're producing is a lot limited. There's a million reasons as to why that's happening, but I mean, if it's just going to get worse, you might as well jump ship and get that 16 gigabytes while you can. And so, yeah, I guess that's everything. So if you enjoyed the rest of this video, then please leave me a like. I guess this is my second time asking, but hey, maybe you didn't want to before, but maybe you changed your mind. Yeah, and subscribe too. Otherwise, peace out, YouTube.